The galaxy's most watched channel shimmered into existence across trillions of displays, its crystalline signal unfurling over worlds both civilized and savage. Crowds gathered in plazas, soldiers clustered in barracks. Even aristocrats leaned forward on jeweled couches, eager for the promised spectacle. The Concord Dominion had advertised the event for weeks, the public termination of the last Terran child in their custody. To most, it was little more than political theater, another reminder of the Empire's supremacy. But to others, it was morbid curiosity. What did humans look like when their pride was stripped away? The camera frame revealed a metallic platform suspended in the center of a colossal amphitheater. Rings of alien dignitaries glittered with polished scales, segmented carapaces, and opalescent eyes. A single figure was dragged into view, small against the immensity of the stage. Shackles cut into his thin wrists, chains rattling with each step as guards pushed him forward. He could not have been older than 14. His hair was unkempt, his clothing a patchwork of tattered rags, and yet, despite the exhaustion carved into his face, his eyes burned with defiance. The Dominion general, towering and reptilian, stood beside him with a flourish. His crest shimmered like molten copper under the lights as he raised a clawed hand to quiet the audience. Behold, his voice thundered through the translator drones, amplified into every corner of the arena. The last remnant of a savage people. The Terrans who resisted our will are extinct, their ashes scattered across conquered soil. This, he gestured to the boy as if presenting livestock, is the final echo of a forgotten breed. The crowd roared with approval. On distant colonies, aliens cheered and raised their drinks, reveling in the humiliation of an enemy long despised. Others watched with unease, wondering whether broadcasting the execution of a child was a show of strength or a dangerous indulgence. Still, no one looked away. The boy lifted his head, meeting the lens of the broadcast drone hovering before him. His lips were pale, but his voice, though strained, carried weight. "My people are not gone," he said, the translator struggling to keep pace with his words. "My father will come." Laughter rippled through the amphitheater. The general sneered, leaning close enough for the audience to see his fangs glint. "Your father? Tell us, boy, is he another Terran corpse rotting in the dirt? Or did he run and leave you to die alone?" The boy's jaw tightened, but he refused to answer. The silence, more than words, unsettled those who watched. There was no trembling plea for mercy, no collapse into despair. Only the faint spark of defiance remained, and it glowed brighter with each breath. The general straightened, flicking his clawed hand toward the executioner's controls. A metallic apparatus unfolded from the floor, sleek and merciless. Blades and restraints gleamed under the harsh lights, designed not merely to kill, but to humiliate. The audience leaned forward in anticipation. As the boy was bound into place, he struggled briefly, but then went still. He turned his gaze once more to the drone lens, as though addressing not the crowd before him, but the billions watching across the stars. His final whisper was clear enough to be captured. "Dad." The blades descended with mechanical precision. The sound was brief, almost anticlimactic, followed by silence heavier than any cheer. For a moment, even the Dominion crowd did not move. Then the general spread his arms and bellowed. "Thus ends the age of Terra." Thunderous applause erupted. Fireworks detonated above the amphitheater. The Dominion had their triumph, packaged and distributed instantly to every subscriber. Yet beneath the roaring approval, an unease lingered. Entire sectors buzzed with questions. Why had the boy called for his father? Was it an empty cry of a doomed child, or a final declaration? Merchants in orbital stations muttered to one another. Soldiers exchanged wary glances, and even in the Dominion's parliament chambers, a few whispered uneasily. On a remote mining world, an insectoid overseer clicked its mandibles in irritation. "Humans are extinct," it insisted to its workers. The boy was bait, nothing more. Still, the workers labored more quietly than usual, glancing often at shadows as if expecting something to emerge. In the higher echelons of command, the reaction was harsher. Reports flowed from the execution site that the broadcast had triggered minor riots on conquered human colonies. Slaves had shouted the name Father as though it carried meaning. Dominion censors scrubbed the footage, attempting to cut the final whisper from the official archive, but it was too late. Millions of private recordings had already been made, copied, and spread. The general who oversaw the event reveled in his victory. He dined with nobles and received endless praise. To him, the boy's last words were nothing more than the bleating of an animal before slaughter. "We have finished the Terrans," he declared at a banquet, down to the last child. "The galaxy will never again hear their name spoken with pride." His companions laughed, raising their cups in agreement. But elsewhere, the reaction was different. Smugglers whispered over encrypted channels about a story older than the war. Pirates traded rumors with unease, their greed momentarily stilled. Even Dominion soldiers, those most indoctrinated to loyalty, found themselves glancing at the shadows with sudden suspicion. The word that passed from mouth to mouth was not Father, but another, older name, one woven into Terran legend, Baba Yaga. The boy's whisper had carried weight it should not have. To the uninformed, it was only a cry for comfort. To those who knew the oldest stories, it was a warning. Baba Yaga was no myth to humanity. In the fires of Earth's last wars, the name had been sharpened into something more. A specter, an assassin, a nightmare told to Dominion recruits to frighten them into obedience. Few believed he had ever been real. Fewer still dared to speak of him openly. Now across the galaxy, the name rose from ash. Children in slave camps whispered it like a prayer. Officers who had laughed at the execution found their dreams unsettled by the memory of the boy's eyes, fearless to the last breath. Merchants swore they saw strange figures on their scanners, vanishing before they could be identified. The Dominion dismissed it all as paranoia. Fear was useful. Fear kept populations obedient. Yet, in their arrogance, they overlooked the tremor beneath the surface. They believed themselves untouchable. They believed that humanity had been erased. The broadcast ended with a triumphant anthem. The Dominion's banners unfurled across the stars. On every screen, the boy's small, broken body was replaced with the shimmering crest of the Empire. The message was clear. Resistance was futile, the Dominion eternal. But the boy's whisper, recorded and replayed in dark corners, told a different story. It was not the whimper of a broken child, but a spark, a seed buried in the hearts of those who listened. It carried a promise that defied extinction. His father would come, and though the galaxy celebrated, though laughter and music filled the banquet halls of conquerors, a silence deeper than triumph stretched across the void. In that silence, a question hung unspoken. What if the boy's words were not an empty cry, but the herald of something far more dangerous? What if his father truly lived? In the cold dark between systems, far from Dominion patrol routes and broadcast relays, a lone vessel drifted in silence. Its hull bore no insignia. Its engines ran in irregular bursts designed to mimic the static of cosmic noise, and its interior felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Within, a single man sat before an ancient terminal, the light of the screen washing over features carved with exhaustion and something harder, something that had survived long after everything else had fallen away. The transmission replayed for the 7th time. The image of the boy filled the screen, ragged, defiant, his chains clattering against the stage. The Dominion general's voice thundered, the crowd roared, the machines whirred, and the blades came down. Each time, the man did not blink. He absorbed every detail, every sound, every micro-expression etched into his son's final moments. When the recording ended, he let the silence linger. He had not wept. The tears had burned out years ago, in wars fought across ruined cities and the bones of civilizations. Grief no longer softened him. It hardened, layering upon itself until only resolve remained. His son's final whisper, "Dad," had struck deeper than any blade. It was not a plea. It was a summons. They had made a mistake. They thought humanity had been extinguished. They thought their stage-managed cruelty would erase the memory of a people. But they had overlooked him, as so many had before. To the galaxy at large, the name was myth, a shadow conjured by Terran rebels to frighten children of other worlds. A bogeyman, a nightmare, Baba Yaga. To him, it was no mask. It was his truest face, forged in war and blood, honed when Earth burned and the Dominion learned that some men were not meant to be broken. He leaned back in his chair, scarred hands folding with deliberate precision. His armor hung in a storage rack nearby, its plates battered but intact, the matte black finish scarred by plasma burns and blade gouges. Each mark told a story, but he had not worn it in years. He had sworn never to don it again after the war, believing he could let the galaxy rot without him. He had tried to live quietly, raising his son in hidden enclaves, moving from world to world, blending into the undergrowth of civilizations. But war had found him again, as it always did, and this time it had taken everything. He rose, joints stiff but unyielding. From a hidden compartment, he retrieved an arsenal carefully preserved. Hand-forged knives balanced for silence, compact rail pistols, collapsible rifles wrapped in oiled cloth. Each weapon was an extension of him, each one kissed with ritual precision as he laid them on the table. He inspected them methodically, not with the urgency of a man preparing for a single strike, but with the patience of one preparing for a campaign that might never end. His enemies were not a single general, not even a ruling council. They were an empire. An empire would burn. While he worked, his mind sifted through the weight of memory. He recalled the first time he had been called Baba Yaga by a frightened Dominion officer. The man had whispered it with his dying breath, a superstition born from watching comrades vanish without warning, their screams silenced before alarms could be raised. The name had spread among enemy ranks faster than his actual deeds. He had never sought it, yet he had worn it as armor. Now it would serve him again, not as protection, but as a weapon. He paused to stare at the recording once more, this time freezing it at the moment his son lifted his head. The boy's eyes stared directly outward, past the Dominion, past the execution, past even the cruelty of the galaxy, and landed squarely on him. It was as if the boy had known, as if he had spoken into the void with absolute certainty that his father would hear. That certainty could not go unanswered. The man spoke aloud for the first time in days, his voice low, gravel sharpened by disuse. "They took my blood. They will pay in theirs." The words echoed in the silent chamber, ritualistic and final. Reports from across the galaxy filtered through the terminal. Whispers of unrest on slave colonies, Dominion patrols disappearing in unexplained ambushes, rumors of sightings in forgotten sectors. Already, the myth was stirring without him lifting a hand. Fear was contagious, and the Dominion had fed it unwittingly by giving his son's death such a stage. Their arrogance had poured oxygen on embers long dormant. Soon, when the fire came, no one would believe it could be stopped. He rose and moved to the armor. Piece by piece, he fastened it upon himself, the weight both familiar and alien after years of disuse. The chest plate settled against his ribs like a promise. The gauntlets clicked into place, sealing him into the shell of a man the galaxy had once feared. When he slid the helmet over his head, the visor came alive with tactical readouts, ghostly blue overlays painting the world in targets and pathways. The transformation was complete. The father was gone. Only Baba Yaga remained. Still, beneath the armor, he carried memory. The boy's laughter in quiet camps, the stubborn tilt of his head, the endless questions about a future he would never see. That memory was no weakness. It was fuel, an inexhaustible engine. Each moment of happiness stolen would be repaid in blood. He checked the ship's coordinates, charting paths through forgotten lanes of the galaxy. His first target lay clear, the general who had presided over the execution. Not because the man was most important, but because symbols mattered. The galaxy had watched that general gloat. The galaxy would watch him fall. Each step must be deliberate, each strike designed to echo louder than the last. The boy had died before billions. His vengeance would unfold before billions more. As preparations concluded, the ship's engines rumbled to life, their sound low and predatory. He sat in the pilot's chair, gloved hands tightening on the controls. Through the viewport stretched an ocean of stars, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere among them, the Dominion believed itself invincible. Soon it would learn fear again. He whispered once more, but not in his silence this time. His words were recorded by the ship, encrypted, and sent into channels known only to those who remembered Terra. "They killed my son. Tell them Baba Yaga comes." The message scattered like seeds on the wind, carried by smugglers, rebels, and slaves. Wherever it landed, it took root in frightened whispers. Some scoffed, calling it propaganda. Others trembled, knowing the legend too well to dismiss. In hidden corners of the galaxy, people began to wait, listening for the footsteps in the dark. Alone in his vessel, he did not wait. He set a course toward his first target, eyes unblinking, pulse steady. The past had ended with the swing of a blade on a Dominion stage. The future began with his vengeance. And when it ended, nothing the Dominion had built would remain. The Dominion garrison on Veros, for was considered impenetrable. Its walls were fortified with alloy thicker than starship hulls, its skies patrolled by hunter drones, its ground units drilled to respond to any intrusion within seconds. Officers stationed there boasted they could repel an entire Terran division, had any still existed. On the night the storm came, the garrison did not raise a single alarm. The first bodies were found at dawn, slumped in watchtowers with their throats slit cleanly, their weapons still in hand. Surveillance records showed nothing, just static, as though the very air had been erased. By midday, the barracks stood silent. A patrol returned to discover comrades hanging upside down from rafters, the Dominion crest carved into their armor with surgical precision. One word was smeared in their blood across the wall: Father. By evening, panic consumed the base. Soldiers whispered of shadows that moved without sound, of a figure who appeared and vanished with impossible speed. The commander ordered lockdown, but communications failed one by one, as if cut from within. When the command tower finally collapsed in an explosion that left no trace of the saboteur, there were no survivors left to report. What spread across the sector were rumors, carried by fleeing traders who saw the flames from orbit. They spoke of a ghost in black armor, a man who walked through fortified walls as though they were smoke. In the capital, Dominion High Command dismissed the destruction as a slave uprising. Yet the details were impossible to ignore. Every soldier was dead, every system sabotaged, every survivor silenced. And the mark left behind was not the rallying cry of rebels, but the unmistakable signature of myth. For the first time in decades, the name Baba Yaga was spoken aloud within Dominion halls. He moved with precision, never striking twice in the same manner, never allowing the enemy to predict his methods. On Krethos, a Dominion admiral was found suffocated in his own command chair, guards dead at his feet, life support systems untouched. On a transport en route to the front, an entire squad of officers vanished, their ship drifting empty, logbooks filled only with static. At a banquet on Ticharwinen, a provincial governor choked mid-toast, blood spilling from a neat puncture in his throat, while every security drone went blind simultaneously. Each act was a performance, not merely an execution. Baba Yaga crafted his vengeance to be witnessed, to seed fear deeper than any blade could cut. The Dominion had paraded his son's death before the galaxy. Now the galaxy watched their leaders fall, one by one, as though death itself had taken interest. Behind the mask, he operated with absolute clarity. He had no illusions of mercy, no fantasies of negotiation. His war was not against an ideology, but against the very fabric of the Dominion. They had made cruelty a spectacle. He would turn their arrogance into terror. And with each strike, he honed himself sharper, more relentless, fueled by the image of his son staring into the lens with unshaken defiance. For the soldiers under Dominion command, duty became a nightmare. Patrols moved in pairs, then in squads, then in entire platoons, yet they vanished just as easily as individuals. Whispers grew that he was not human at all, but some ancient spirit given form. Recruits muttered about curses, officers lashed out in paranoia, and morale crumbled faster than any fleet engagement could have achieved. The Dominion had fought empires, pirates, and machines, but they had never fought fear itself. High Command convened emergency councils, their deliberations frantic. They argued whether to censor the reports or exploit them. Some demanded a bounty. Others urged silence, fearing the name would spread further if acknowledged. At last, one counselor lost composure during a live broadcast, pounding the table as he shouted, "Stop saying his name. He is not real." The clip spread instantly, replayed endlessly on underground channels, achieving the opposite of its intent. Now every corner of the galaxy spoke the name with a shudder. Through it all, he pressed forward, choosing his targets with deliberate cruelty. He was not indiscriminate. He never struck at civilians, never wasted time on soldiers too low to matter. Each death carried weight. Each disappearance struck at the hierarchy that had presided over his boy's execution. The general who mocked his son still lived, surrounded by fleets and bodyguards, but the net was closing. The father's war was not yet at its climax, and he would savor every step that led to it. Between missions, in the silence of his vessel, he allowed himself moments of reflection. He cleaned his weapons by hand, repairing the wear of each strike. He reviewed the execution recording once more, letting his son's voice fortify his resolve. Sometimes he whispered apologies into the void, not for what he had done, but for what he was about to unleash. There was no peace in him, only a storm waiting to consume everything. On the edges of Dominion space, resistance groups began to stir. Slaves who had once accepted chains as permanent now murmured of revolt. Smugglers offered supplies at discounts to those they believed might aid him. Human survivors, scattered and broken, lifted their heads for the first time in years. Whether they knew him truly or not, they believed the legend, and belief was enough to move armies. The Dominion responded with brute force. Fleets patrolled routes with unprecedented vigor, checkpoints multiplied, and interrogations swept through border systems. Yet with every tightening of their grip, more fingers slipped through. Baba Yaga did not strike where they guarded most heavily. He struck where their arrogance left them blind. He made their paranoia his greatest weapon, forcing them to spread thin, to doubt each other, to question their own shadows. When he finally infiltrated a Dominion listening post and hijacked its frequency, his message was short and clear. His voice, distorted through layers of encryption, echoed across the network. "You took my son. I will take everything." Then the station imploded, leaving only silence. The declaration galvanized the galaxy. Some trembled, others cheered, but none ignored it. His vengeance was no longer rumor or shadow. It was fact, undeniable and irreversible. He had become not just a father seeking retribution, but a symbol of defiance against an empire that had believed itself eternal. The general who had overseen the boy's execution now slept little, his chambers lined with guards and automated defenses. He insisted he feared nothing, but his eyes betrayed him, darting at every flicker of movement, every whisper in the halls. He had begun to understand what the boy's last words had meant. And still, the father came closer. The Dominion capital burned with light, its towers spiraling into the sky like crystalline spears, its avenues patrolled by legions of soldiers and machines. Security had never been tighter. Every entrance was scanned, every broadcast monitored, every shadow dissected by drones programmed to hunt the impossible. At the heart of this fortress sat the general who had overseen the boy's death, surrounded by layers of protection that no sane adversary would attempt to breach. Yet even in his armored chamber, sleep eluded him. Fear gnawed at the edges of his thoughts, a constant whisper that the father was coming. That night, the whisper became real. The city's power grid faltered, not with a violent crash, but with a subtle dimming, as though the capital itself had drawn a sharp breath. Surveillance drones flickered, then went blind. Troops rushed to their stations, but their comms filled with static, their orders lost in a storm of silence. Panic spread in ripples, each soldier realizing too late that the thing they dreaded was already among them. He moved like inevitability, a figure draped in black armor scarred by wars older than this empire. He did not run, did not rush. He advanced with a steady purpose, each step dismantling the myth of dominion and vulnerability. Guards who dared to face him were dispatched without flourish, quick, efficient, final. He did not linger over their deaths. They were not his target. His every movement carried the weight of focus, the singular hunger of a man who had already buried his grief and replaced it with vengeance. Inside the command tower, the general barked desperate orders. His guards sealed blast doors, activated defense grids, and prepared escape routes. Yet one by one, those defenses failed. Locks disengaged of their own accord. Drones turned their weapons on each other, and alarms fell silent before they could scream. The general felt the walls closing in. No matter how many layers he hid behind, the father would reach him. When the last door slid open, the general's composure broke. He stood before the black-armored figure with a trembling hand on his weapon, though he lacked the courage to draw it. "You can't do this," he stammered. "I was following orders. It was propaganda, nothing more." The boy was meaningless. The figure stepped closer, visor reflecting the pale terror in the general's eyes. His voice, when it came, was low, distorted, and cold enough to freeze marrow. "He was my son." The general's knees weakened. He babbled promises, wealth, power, safe passage to forgotten worlds. But the words fell hollow. No bargain could matter now. This was not negotiation. This was reckoning. The black figure seized him, dragging him toward the broadcast chamber at the heart of the tower. The same chamber where the boy's execution had been staged, where billions had watched cruelty masquerade as triumph. The chamber systems came alive, their feeds hijacked effortlessly. Across the galaxy, every Dominion screen flickered. Citizens in markets, soldiers in barracks, nobles in gilded halls, all watched as the general was forced into the same apparatus his victim had occupied. Shackles clamped around his limbs, machinery whirred, and for the first time in his life, the general tasted the helplessness he had inflicted. The father did not speak at first. He let the image settle, let the weight of symmetry press upon every watching eye. Then he turned to the drone lens, his visor reflecting the endless audience. "You celebrated a child's death," he said, each word like iron striking stone. "Now you will celebrate your masters." The blades descended, precise and merciless. The general's scream cut through every Dominion channel before static consumed the feed. Billions witnessed his end. Billions saw the conqueror of children reduced to nothing more than prey. Silence followed. Not triumph, not cheers, but silence. The Dominion, once invincible, now looked fragile. The myth they had mocked had become flesh, and it had struck at their heart. Their fleets still soared, their armies still marched, but the illusion of eternity was shattered. Worlds on the fringe stirred with rebellion. Governors fled their posts, and whispers of collapse spread faster than any official decree could stop. In the chamber, the father stood alone among the wreckage. For a long moment, he did nothing. The vengeance was complete, the promise fulfilled, yet the void within him did not close. His son remained gone, the boy's laughter reduced to memory. He removed his helmet, the air biting his scarred face, and for the first time since donning the armor, his expression softened. Grief, unmasked, carved deep lines across his features. He left the capital without fanfare, vanishing into the dark as Dominion fleets scrambled aimlessly. Entire sectors remained paralyzed, uncertain whether to resist or surrender to fear. No one could predict where he would strike next, or if he would strike at all. The legend was now more dangerous than the man, for legends did not tire, did not falter, did not die. On a quiet world far from the chaos, he stood at a grave marked only by stone. The soil was freshly turned, the epitaph simple. He placed a hand upon it, fingers trembling despite all the steel he had built around his soul. "Rest now." He whispered, the words rough, fragile. "They will never forget you." Around him, no cameras watched, no audience waited. This moment was not for the galaxy, but for the boy alone. The father who had become a myth allowed himself a breath of silence. then rose. His war was not over. Perhaps it never would be. The Dominion still lived, its power vast, its cruelty unspent. But its certainty had been broken, and that fracture would spread. He would ensure it spread. As he departed, rumors blossomed like wildfire. Some claimed Baba Yaga would bring down the entire Dominion, that no fortress could stand against him. Others said he would vanish again, retreating into legend now that his son's death was avenged. The truth mattered less than the belief. Fear was already seated, rebellion already blooming. The Empire could marshal fleets, but fleets could not kill a story. The galaxy whispered his name, not as myth now, but as reality. Parents told their children to obey, lest Baba Yaga come for them. Rebels told their comrades to be brave, for Baba Yaga fought for them. In the Dominion's highest halls, leaders trembled at shadows, knowing they were no longer untouchable. He walked alone into the void, a solitary figure against the infinite stars. His path stretched without end, marked by grief and blood. Yet behind him, the galaxy changed, reshaped by the weight of a father's vengeance. His son's voice still echoed in memory. One word, fragile but unyielding. Dad. The whisper that had summoned him once would carry forever, etched into history. Baba Yaga had come, and the galaxy would never forget.